Hello, everybody. This is Jeremy Bruce from Saga Media, and this is another episode here. And we have a special guest on today, Eric McKenna, somebody I've been following for quite some time, and I'm glad I got to get him on the show here as soon as I did. So I appreciate you coming on the show. Before we start, I did want to make a little bit of an announcement. This is our first year, not to the date, but we have been in for 1 year here, and so congratulations, Saga Media. Right 1 year. We look to continue this journey and expanding out. So please, all of our viewers, like, share, comment, and we definitely appreciate your engagement and your support. So thank you for everybody. Thank you, Al Marshke, who can't be here today. He's been a big help. He's my partner, Blue Mars Media, Al Marshke. So thank you. And so, Eric, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. And welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So you have a very diverse background, and you do a lot. That's why I follow it, and we like diverse here at Saga Media. But you've been in the music industry with guitars. Mm-hmm. You also are in real estate.
Yes.
I've been in real estate for 15 years, so we align there. And you have your own podcast.
I do.
And so, and you have some interesting topics, and we're going to get into it. UFOs, everybody. Okay, I've got a whole segment set up, so I'm excited. So, yeah, welcome, and I wanted to just jump in and tell us about yourself and kind of your roots and where it all started.
Fair enough. Pittsburgh native. Grew up in Coriopolis, and uniquely, my wife and I have come back to an old Victorian house there. So we're back. Airport area where I loafed, so to speak. I'm a typical college dropout, which was not totally uncommon in the 80s, for that area. Working class area of Coriopolis. I had a pretty good run. I forced my way into the business world, muscled my way in to work along those who were degreed. Learned very early that being nice to people and having a positive attitude would get you somewhere, I kind of had that as opposed to maybe all the paper. 1996, I lost my only sibling, my brother Brian, to narcotics, and it really kind of put a shock into my world. And I was newly married to my first wife, and just everything got turned on its head. And the timidity I think that I had for most of my life up until that point just seemed to go away, because it was such a moment that reassured me that, hey, life is exactly fragile from moment to moment. So the timidity seemed to go away. I was working with a company called PageNet here in Pittsburgh. Pretty proud of that. We had a great group of people, but the paging industry was on its way out. One thing led to another, and I ended up going on a vacation, very unsure of my life, and I ran across a couple at a tiki bar. And I know as crazy as this little story is, this is kind of the life-changing moment that set everything right for me. Was my wife and I went down to this tiki bar in this little Mexican resort, and I think she had a couple too many, and she went up to the room, and I, of course, wanted to hang around a little longer to have way too many. And I befriended a elderly couple from New York City, and he was a jeweler. And we started talking, and I don't know if I wore my emotions on my sleeve, but they were putting me on the couch, so to speak, and talking about life and so forth. And he basically said to me that, he was a jeweler and loved everything about jewelry. He grew up with it, and he had a fantastic Rolex Presidential we started chatting about. I was a very amateur watch enthusiast. But he said to me, I married my passion with my vocation. As far as I'm concerned, that's the ultimate bliss in life. I was like, oh, that's pretty deep. And he asked me point blank, goes, so what do you like to do? What do you do? Find something you dig and make that your vocation. I'm like, I sell pagers. What are you talking about? He said, what do you love? What do you dig? And at that moment, I could not answer, as ridiculous as that sounds. And then I thought about it for a while, and I realized that guitar-driven rock and roll was everything I really, from deep down in my soul, drove me and propelled me every single day. It was the one thing in life that I loved beyond the people in my life. He says, well, do something there. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do that? So I went home. I said, I always wanted to play guitar seriously, put these drums away I tinker with. I want to be a guitarist. Went home, bought a guitar, started taking lessons, played obsessively as a 33-year-old guy. And I willed my way to become a quote-unquote guitarist in a couple of years. buying and selling online, and I got a couple guitars that I didn't like, and I realized I better sell them before my wife saw the bill. I put it on this thing called the internet and this thing called eBay. Got rid of them, and I got rid of them for a profit, and it didn't take long for me to figure out that there was something to that. So in '99, I started this company called Boogie Street Guitars just to buy and sell guitars, and you know, a little serendipity. Things started to work out. A couple of years later, we had 2,500 square feet of storage space, shipping all over the world. I partnered with a company called Washburn Guitars, and I just got the opportunity to work with their stable of artists directly, creating custom pieces. Paul Stanley of KISS, the end of, unfortunately, Dimebag Darrell's life, he was there. Roger Waters of Pink Floyd, many others. And really had a beautiful circumstance where I found my passion, married it to my vocation, and grew this business for 15 years. It's fantastic.
So I have a question. So you brought up some famous names in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've followed a lot of them and seen some of them in concert. So how does, because, you know, here's a question I have as a fellow entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. I'm always wanting to know the model and how you get into, like, because there's guitar stores, you know, locally
Absolutely.
that probably will never see a famous rock star walk in their door. So how do you break through? Like, I know some of it's luck, but it also is, you know, luck. It comes with hard work as well.
Certainly.
And how does like a Dimebag Darrell or somebody end up buying a guitar through your company?
Yeah. So the way it worked was I was buying and selling. Like, I was a horse trader, buying used, turning around, selling it. It was just very elementary free market, right? Mm-hmm. And the web was very unknown to most people still in the late 90s. So I was first mover advantage, right? It was profitable, but it was unfulfilling because I just couldn't get any manufacturer to make me a dealer. I wanted to be an official dealer. Like, I wanted to be a Gibson dealer, a Fender dealer. I had all these companies. I would love to be a dealer, online only. I didn't want a storefront. Mm-hmm. Well, at that time, they didn't understand the internet, and it was terrifying their dealer network. These dealers that were mom and pop dealers, or even their larger ones that were traditional brick and mortar stores, were terrified of the internet. They didn't understand. And I was just, you know, timing's everything. But they were all shutting the door in my face. I was writing very eloquent letters. I flew to Arizona to talk to Fender Music. I did everything I could to convince them to let me be an online dealer back in 99, 2000. No, it wasn't even about money. They did not want to do that, which I thought was just insane because the opportunity was so vast.
It's different. That's why. So
the company, my last resort was the company I wasn't personally fond of as a guitar player, which was Washburn Guitars out of Chicago. It's my I viewed it as my last hope, right? Because I got the doors shut everywhere else. And I flew there. I befriended a guy that worked there, Steve Bennett. And somehow we ended up getting an audience with Rudy Schlacher, the president of U.S. Music Corporation. And I always laugh because Rudy probably just was in a good mood that day. He took my audience. I looked at him, and I didn't tell him he was my last resort, but I told him that I have these ideas, these visions to do custom guitars. I wasn't even thinking about co-branding at that time or anything, but I think these aesthetics will work. I think kids will dig this style and this style. Using your designs, but the aesthetics, that was my bag. And for whatever reason, he looked at me and goes, well, let's give it a shot. I couldn't believe it. And then he said, we also have a couple artists, not the bigger ones, but some artists, let's just say they weren't playing the instruments. They were our signature instruments that we paid them for. So we can't, for whatever reason, we're not able to interact with them, or we don't know why. Can you contact these folks and maybe, embed yourself with them, and let's see if we can get them so we all can make some money. So I just started calling these artists and getting them to like the guitars that Washburn was creating and tweaking them and getting them, embedded there and doing unique stuff. And then all of a sudden, here I am in Pittsburgh with all these custom Washburn guitars that were unique to us and the regular stock stuff too. And, it shocked the guitar industry because that's not how things were done. Washburn was the first company to take a person of my size at that time, which would be a small business or maybe a medium-sized dealer, and give them a dealership and let them sell online only with no brick-and-mortar store. That changed the entire industry. I think that things kind of changed from that moment on. So we created uniqueness, and we also were not afraid to embed ourselves with these artists and talk to them and ask them, what don't you like about the guitar we made you, and fix that. And hey, by the way, if we do this, can you give me permission to make 100 of these exclusive to us? It was like, it wasn't like minting money, but it was the closest thing I was ever in terms of like, guaranteed revenue. Just if you do these special things, because Americans like, I don't know, custom.
Yep.
Right? We like to feel unique. And that's what and this is a whole different topic. We don't have to go there, Jeremy, but ultimately the bottom line is it boggles my mind that we crave uniqueness in this country. I feel Americans love uniqueness, to have things that others don't, or become part of a select group of people that own a certain thing, right? We show them off. We hang them on our walls. But yet, at the same time, we're so quick to join these big teams. And it doesn't translate to our thinking. We're not independent thinkers like we should be, but we love we want to show off our unique stuff. And I realized that early on I could find an audience of collectors who would want unique things, and I provided it to them. And that's how the Boogie Street, legend, or whatever people say, legacy, it grew, because it was like a big fraternal club of collectors, and it was specific to this artist or this artist or this artist. And it was all out of a Robinson Township. Our address was on Ryan Court in Robinson Township, and all out of 2,000 square feet of office space. It was different.
It really
I got lucky. I mean, there's a lot of serendipity in there too. But
you gotta sometimes luck is being persistent and keep going. I found that out in my own sense. But now you brought up off camera KISS. Mm-hmm. You worked with them. Now who was the member that liked your? They liked your?
It was Paul Stanley. Okay. So and this is why this is a lot of serendipity here. I just grew up a big KISS fan. Kid late 70s,
yep.
And it was my thing, and a lot of my friends, of course. And I never lost a love for that band. It always wasn't cool in the 80s and early 90s to like that band, of course. And I can't say that I drove into the corporate parking lot with KISS blaring out my window every day. But once the Washburn Boogie Street arrangement got momentum, I kept chiding the Washburn president, Rudy Schlocker, hey, Paul Stanley was with you in the 90s for a while. You need to bring him back. I never thought it would happen. And then on summer of about this time of the year, summer of 2006, Larry English, one of the executives at Washburn, calls me on the phone and says, hey, somebody wants to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, I got time for this, Larry. I was raising my kids at the time. They were little, and I'm in this office and chaos. And he goes, no, you got to take this call. It's going to come up private on your phone. You're not going to see a caller ID, but don't ignore it. Take the call. Whatever. Not even remotely thinking it's a big deal. Yeah, I answered the phone. I said, Eric McKenna. And he said, Eric, it's Paul Stanley. And I was like, what? That led to, just helping customize his designs. And it is just an amazing 8 years of just collaboration. And you meet your hero, and people say, hey, don't meet your hero because you're going to be disappointed. I'm probably guessing that's true most instances. He couldn't have been any better, gracious to my family, kind, just a super, super guy. I mean, we couldn't pay for anything at any shows we went to. Carte blanche. Just good guy. Good guy. We did very well with him. And, most business relationships have a shelf life, and it ended not because of us or really him. It was just other factors involved, different manufacturers, contracts, and things. But yeah, for 8 years, I got to live this crazy KISS dream as a middle-aged guy, and and I look back on that, and I'm thinking that's something you don't see every day. Yeah, I got very lucky.
Yeah, that's
very lucky.
That's a good story, and you talk about fulfillment and where the conversation came from, the elderly couple, when you were on vacation that aligned. It's like, if that didn't happen, do you think that you could have not propelled you? It's funny how certain things in life kind of get you to because what if that didn't
what if I had gone up to the room with my wife because we had enough to drink? I look at a lot of serendipity there, and the saddest part about it was, my wife snapped a photograph of me sitting at this tiki bar by myself when she was walking back to the room. I had the photo, and it was probably that couple was on the other side of the tiki board. They hadn't quite arrived yet. But I have the moment that really it all kind of started, but I don't have the two characters, the husband and wife, who really propelled me. And I wish I don't have their name. I've always looked back at that. It would be amazing to reconnect with them if they, God willing, that they're still with us. Who knows?
Yeah.
But it was such a monumental conversation. I think that most of us have these monumental conversations, and sometimes we're not aware of it until it's way later in life when we look back and reflect.
I got a turn back moment. Well, if you're watching the show, reach out. All his information is going to be linked below, and his show's a lot bigger than ours, so I'm sure you'll be able to find him.
Not at all.
But no, that's great. No, I definitely can align with like turn back moments and things of that nature. And I do believe personally there are things that happen. I believe some individuals don't take those and kind of, it doesn't resonate deep into the core to like make a change or this and that.
Yeah, because change is scary. I mean, like, and we all struggle with our own insecurities about things. I didn't grow up with little timidity. I had a lot of timidity growing up. I was that middle of the road kid, they say. I wasn't really that popular, but I was cool enough to hang out with the cool kids once in a while. I was just right in the middle. But I had that timidity, and I think that every kid growing up has a level of timidity. But in '96, when I lost Brian, and I just remember, watching the whole thing unfold and then just seeing him, at the viewing and watching, that whole day is like runs that like a film strip in my head and always has. And at that moment, I wasn't worried about being fired at my job. There was nothing in my life I thought that I couldn't survive. It wasn't that I devalued anything. Not at all. I just realized that there's nothing that I'm going to succumb to. I'm not afraid of taking a risk, if that makes any sense. I'm not going to be an idiot and take, I'm not going to bet the house on the Chargers to win, nothing like that. But in terms of taking calculated risks and really banking on myself, it really changed that day. It took a couple years to get that moment with that elderly couple to put it in motion. Sure. But man, once I was selling guitars and getting 30, 40, 50, 70% return, and then years later, looking at the standard dealer business model, which you're a numbers guy, you'll appreciate this. Dealers were working off of sometimes 15 to 20% margin if they were lucky on a musical instrument. Well, when I go to Washburn and I say, hey, let's do this, and then they come back to me and say, hey, it's too expensive to make in the States, but we have a factory in Korea. And I'm like, import guitars aren't valued. And he goes, well, what if we change that? And I said, what do you mean? Well, we started making high-end import guitars that fit a price model. USA custom guitars from Gibson and Fender and Paul Reed Smith were usually, even back 25 years ago, they were like $2,000 and up, right? $1,700 and up. Mm-hmm. Imports were always at that time like $700 and down. So you had this vacuum. You had this $700 to $1,800 vacuum that no manufacturer was swimming in there. Well, I would go make these high-end custom imports that would cost a little more to the dealer, but still imports. But I put them out on the street aggressively for like $1,900, $1,800, $1,500, create a certificate of authenticity, number the back of the headstocks. If the artist is involved, they'll sign the guitar. I created uniqueness and specialization and customization, and people dug it. And I saw it, and all of a sudden now I'm at 80, 90% return. So if I knew if I made a Paul Stanley run of 70 of these or 80 of these, I could almost to the dollar calculate my guaranteed return. I mean, it was fantastic. Eventually, the market caught up. Nothing lasts forever. But we changed the way guitars were sold from a retail standpoint. I mean, we never were going to compete with Guitar Center and big box places. I didn't care about that business. But the way that if the fans of a band interacted with a guitarist that they love, we helped usher things in at affordable prices, but still custom and cool with the artist involved. And the web helped that. The web was younger and new. It gave us that. Could we do it today? I don't know. Is the landscape different? Probably. This is well before social media and everything else. I mean, you had to go to my website to get on our forum, the PPHP forums or whatever they were called, and that's how we interacted. We created something called the Boogie Street Experience, where people would come and they would get involved with our company. And Sometimes the artist would peek in. We were always looking to provide a fan experience along with the guitar, if possible. And I did that because I was a rock and roll fan, and I lived through the 70s and 80s and the 90s where there wasn't an internet. There wasn't, I remember looking for information. I'll never forget this. It was 1983, 4, and Paul Stanley was on a little clip on People magazine dating Lisa Hartman. And as a KISS fan, it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen, because here was like a member of KISS without their makeup on, and but you would crave for little bits of information. And now with the web, it's information overload. Yeah. We know too much.
I agree.
About stars, about celebrities, news people. We just know too much. And back then, when there wasn't any information, you would read an album cover from back to front every day until you knew what it smelled like, right? Mm-hmm. So that's I have that. Being 58, I have a very clear memory of before the web. I call it the before times, usually pre-95, and then I have the web on. So I'm in a unique position. I lived through both, and I would never change a thing. There were some great things before the web, but there's a lot of better things, I think, after the web too.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. It made there is. I mean, a lot of people with you get people like they just can't do technology, and it's not something that they want in their life, and they just will not. And especially you get older folks and whatnot that just it's not their thing. But
it's funny you said that.
My thing is it's could we have ever? I remember dreaming about a day where I could literally just lay in my bed. Like we used to see like this futuristic where do you remember in Back to the Future 2, actually? Remember when he comes home and like the screen comes down and he got the fat and all that, and I'm like, that was the Zoom that they envisioned, Zoom calls and whatnot. It was pretty fascinating, even though they were still using a fax machine. So that was the one part they got wrong. And we still don't have real hoverboards, but and the shoes don't really tie the laces that are at least out there. But I think technology is fascinating. Yeah, I do believe that there's information overload, and I believe there's a portion of it that can be used or is kind of getting people where they're not paying attention to the world anymore. That's the part I don't like. So much of this. I mean, I literally see people walking across the street with their headsets.
So true. It happened to me walking in today. Yeah,
it was hit somebody. And it's like, so that's the one part. I like nature and whatnot, so I get out and experience it. I believe it's really good for the soul. But it's that's the one part I don't like about it. Now, you went on your run with and that's a pinnacle. Like I stated earlier, that most guitar, small businesses, medium businesses don't ever reach that and get members from KISS or Pantera or anybody to get your guitars through their shop. But you said there was a point where the market caught up.
Certainly.
Was that a point that you had to kind of make a change?
Absolutely.
You're in real estate.
Absolutely.
And that was after, or okay.
Yeah, it was. I could see the writing on the wall in 2000. It actually started in 2007. We were, still doing very well, but 2007, the housing market collapsed. Oddly, and then I became a realtor years later. But just the recession in general. And I saw a lot of my international buyers dry up because the dollar, the domestic business dried up because 401ks were taking a pounding. All the investment bankers that were my high-end buyers, they were not willing to spend high-end money anymore. But oddly, what the double whammy for us was that the dollar remained so damn strong overseas during that time. So it priced out my international buyers too. So we got creative and we made some runs that didn't have the same return as I was used to, but still healthy. But I could see that if I don't get this straight, then I got about a 4 or 5 year period left. And then I started to tire a little bit. My second wife and I, we obviously the business going down that wasn't looked upon very well, and then she ended up splitting. So that issue, coupled by the fact that I don't think I don't know if my designs are being received as well. I was never sure, actually, in the end, was it the market itself or was it my lack of enthusiasm or whatever. But I knew by the time 2012 was around, I have to find the next thing. I hadn't earned enough money that I could retire the way I'd like to. So I knew I had, and who wants to retire at, whatever I was, 47, didn't make any sense. But at the same time, I had been out of corporate America since '99, and the idea of having a boss, or I could do it, but real estate just made sense. I mean, completely independent. I had been doing videos starting in 2006 with Windows Media, a WMV file, right? So I was putting these weekly videos out for our boogie board family of customers, and it was really well received. It was just crazy. Just the content was pretty nuts, but we were showing product and talking to people. So I was okay on camera. And I figured, well, these realtors are trying to figure out video now. They're trying to figure out social media. I'm already doing this. I mean, this can't be that hard. I'm not afraid to put my face out there, and I'll do it. And it's 2013. I shadowed a very successful agent in town for a while. By 2014, I was hit the ground running, and I haven't looked back. I mean, so it was the next thing that propelled me, and it's been fantastic. I love being a realtor because I love the relationships.
Yeah, no, it's a good industry. I'm in real estate. I got started during the. I'm not a realtor, but I got started as an investor and developer and everything in between. And it was brutal during those 2008.
And we're still not where we need to be.
No, we're not. Now we're dealing with other interest rates and all that, and where it is, an overpriced market, in my opinion.
But everything is cyclical in a way, right? I mean, things always as good as they were. It's as bad as they will be, but ultimately I'll always believe that they will return back. So sometimes you got to wait it out.
Yeah, and that's like, we experienced that during 2020 and 2021, not with just real estate, but going back into, so when I got started right before in 2007, it was, I remember I'm like, I'm going to start being a real estate investor, started kind of going and listening to public speakers who were trying to sell you a program, but I was trying to just take nips and pieces from it. But what I learned was a lot of real estate agents. So we got into the foreclosures and short sales. So we had a nationwide short sale program that we were negotiating. We had our own negotiators. We were getting deals done and passing them off to end up. That's when the hedge funds started, like BlackRock and Blackstone and things of that nature. But we would also get it to our price we want, fix it up and sell it. And it would save the homeowner from going through a foreclosure. But what I noticed in that time period was the real estate agents, there was a big change in that industry. It was probably right before you got in. But a lot of the old realtors that were living off the high days of the everybody gets a mortgage for the last 6 years, 7 years, under the Community Reinvestment Act of 1996. Well, it was a different version of it, but they didn't know what hit them. And I noticed the same thing during 2020 and 2021 with restaurants. The ones who adjusted quickly were able to, like the to-go orders and really had their alignment and systems in place. They thrived and did the best. But
isn't that the key? I mean, adaptability to me is oftentimes talk to entrepreneurs. First thing they say is, "What's your number one key?" Right? This is my number one key. This is my number one lesson. To me, it was adaptability, because that was the ultimate survival mechanism. All the rest can figure itself out, which I will get to. But if you're not willing to read the room, read your market, and adapt, if you can't do that, you will not make it.
Yeah. And that's what I love, because I did short sale training programs, and why I did them for free for a lot of the realty companies in the area, and I did it because I was trying to build out a clientele, and you'd be shocked at how many would show up that they didn't know what a short sale was.
Certainly.
Or like really the foreclosure process and how an REO and how a bank takes
100%.
the property back. So I had to walk them through and how to successfully negotiate a short sale. But I was trying to get them, so obviously it was going to be a win-win. I could help them do this. I could gain some business out of it, relationship building. But majority of it was, look, I don't know if I'm ever going to do any business with any of these realtors that are in this class that I'm offering for free, but if I can at least teach them something, they'll learn. But I would say majority of the ones that were in my class, at least 50% probably ended up exiting out of the.
Oh, most definitely. And we're seeing that now, too.
Yeah, because it's not as easy as it was from 19 to 22 and whatnot. And now things are, you got to hustle. And so it is different. But from you utilizing social media then, do you think you had a leg up right from the start getting into real estate?
I think so. I just, maybe not even in terms of the technical aspect of it. I think it was just comfortability with being behind camera or being behind the mic and understanding the power of it. When eBay started to wane, 2009, 2010, when I realized I'm not getting the sales I typically am, and their fees started to escalate, I was just putting things on this Facebook page I grew, and there was no fees. And I started to learn all of a sudden, because our website did okay, but I still felt I needed eBay. But then all of a sudden I realized, hey, social media is free at that time anyways. At least to me it was free. And the power of just networking, because it took me back to when the web was young, where in the beginning it was just the power of the gathering, right? You put something out there of value, people swarm to it. That was happening again in social media. Of course, people will find a way to monetize it, but in the beginning of each movement, the beginning of each new thing, there's a period, I believe, where if your timing is right, you can really take advantage of it. Absolutely. I don't know if AI is the next thing, but monetizing is really cloudy. How do you get in there to monetize it? I mean, every social media influencer will tell you on Instagram how to take AI and do this and that, and you'll make $8,000 a month. Rock on, if you can do it. I mean, but there's a lot of fraud out there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think with every movement, and we used to think that, the web was the big thing in '96. It was just changing everything. Then there was this thing called Web 2.0, I think, in the early 2000s. I never knew what that was. But the web got stagnant, and I think social media, for lack of better or worse, kind of saved the web. It really brought some crazy connectivity.
Sure.
And
that was kind of the Web 2.0 was the introduction of that. I was at a real estate conference in Los Angeles in July of 2010. And I remember that's when branding and that was going to help you build your business. And a lot of these guys, and the foreclosures were still, a lot of the people that were there were still trying to kind of pitch how to get these and it was still a mainstay in the market. But I remember that everybody was trying to, got to get on Twitter, and this thing called Twitter. And I thought it was silly at the time.
Well, I remember MySpace.
I'm like, that too.
That was the first one we were on.
Yes, and I was on MySpace too. I remember saying how I'd never go to Facebook because I'm on MySpace. I'm sticking it out. But the Twitter thing I thought was silly, and now I totally get it, obviously, for a marketing standpoint. But back then I was like, people talk about going to the crap. I'm sitting on the pot. Or like what I'm doing at this moment, I'm like, how can you? And then I started playing with it, and that's what
it was the swarm. It was like
it was like
it was like a moth to a light.
And it's changed now. Like now, X / formerly Twitter, because even then it was a lot of it was still hard to market, at least in my opinion, to get through all the bullshit. That was just people talking smack on each other and stuff. And now it's changed more. Like if you want the fastest media, that's where you go.
Yes.
Like the story's going to be there before it's going to hit.
It's changed society.
Even Facebook or Instagram or the news media's website.
Yeah.
So that's where it's fast. So with your realty company now, you have your own brokerage?
No.
Okay.
No. I started Howard Hanna, and I went to Remax for a while. I'm with a small brokerage out of Robinson Township. It's owned by Jeremy Pronto. It's called Realty Connect. And I have now a history of working for large brokerages and small brokerages. And I absolutely feel more comfortable with small brokerage. Yeah. Howard Hanna training was amazing. The people were great. But I felt like I was in a corporate environment. They didn't like me wearing denim. I used to wear a baseball hat as part of my branding. Didn't like that. And I get it. That's their way. But I just knew I've got some, I'm not unmanageable, but, once you're an entrepreneur for so long, you have to do it your own. You have to do your own thing. Yeah. And at this young, at Realty Connect, it's just the best experience that I've had in real estate because I get to be myself, right? And that's all anyone can ask. Just leave me alone. Let me do my thing. Yeah. It'll all work out. Because to this point in my life, that freedom has served me well. And I just needed a broker and an owner that understood that, and they do.
And I have a lot of colleagues and friends and even some family members who have all done the same thing. They worked to the big Keller Williams and everything, and they had great experiences.
Certainly.
There. But a lot of them, when they go to the smaller ones, they in the area, they'll never leave because this is where it's at. I have the freedom to do what I want.
Right.
Right. I'm not there's nobody looking over my shoulder or things like that. So. Now, we talked briefly about market and where it is today because you kind of you mentioned about realtors are seeing that today. Where is the real estate? Because I've been all right. So a few years ago, and I guess I'm choking on my words now. I'm like, oh, this crash has got to happen. Mm-hmm. Where do you feel that the market's happening? And because it is if you were, I'm not a big believer in buying just a big house and then I'm going to live in there. That is a liability in my economic ideology. I'm a big believer in getting an asset that's going to cash flow for me, and if I can end up living there and renting to myself or my corporation, that's my philosophy. Yes, there's something to be said about having a home with a family, and I get that, but being in economics and having to look at numbers all day long. I see where some people are buying, like especially in the last year or two, and I can't believe that people are out there. Like I watched a house last year in a particular neighborhood in the South Hills of Pittsburgh that I would say 3 years ago, this thing went for about $225,000, and to me, that house isn't worth $150,000 because they couldn't move in for 3 months. It was an older lady that happened to be in a neighborhood where I was close to where I grew up, and I still have a see family. But older lady passed away. The place was not in good condition. I couldn't believe. Still, I'm not shocked, but I sort of still am kind of like baffled, I should say, that there was like 7 offers and they were competing. And then I looked at I'm like, so you're paying about 7.9% right now, and you overpaid for that property by about $80,000 to $90,000.
There's no question. And there's so many examples of that. Again, this is only my opinion.
Yes.
So there's so many examples of that I believe. And I do think the run-up started during 2020 when it took us out of commission for about 2.5 months, 3 months. When we were able to go back to work, a couple things happened. A lot of people got their real estate license during these down times. And because we were not allowed to gather, which is the traditional way to train agents, because agents really are not always self-starters, especially the newer ones.
Yeah.
They did very little training online. They were out in the marketplace. A lot of money was out in the marketplace too during 2021. It wasn't there before. Inventory immediately dried up, especially because folks my age did not want to sell their house. It wasn't an interest rate issue. It was a fear issue, societal. We have all these things going on, this pandemic and all. I'm just going to hunker down at home. I'm not going to list my house. This was before the interest rate run up.
Yeah.
It started in 2020, and it has only gotten worse because I think some of that timidity to list was still kind of there when the interest rates started to spike, and then the interest rate spike is definitely keeping people in their homes. So we have an inventory shortage, end of story. The interest rates, if the inventory was better, the market would adjust to the interest rates. Painful, but the market would, our real estate market would adjust to it. But we don't have the inventory. We just don't. And we are all happy when we see an extra 1,000 houses this week on the West Penn multi-list. Well, that's great, but we're still like at 1/3 where we should be, or where we were 5 years ago. And
here's a challenge I see as a developer, and I don't necessarily develop homes, but I used to be in that sector more, and I still am kind of, because we have some land that we're selling, and there's developers looking at it, and it is challenging if you're a smaller developer right now.
Certainly.
To make any money.
Certainly.
So that's that. Something else we've looked at is converting offices and office space. But you see, there's the challenge with that is it's actually more expensive on a construction standpoint in some cases to do that than to just build new. And so and then you get into the dynamic of communities don't really like the continuation of these, like in these neighborhoods in the South Hills, for example. I mean, there's a lot of pushback when a new housing development. Certainly. They want something else. So you fight with that. So you're going against the grain with all of that, and then we still have to talk about a housing shortage. Plus, you go back to the 2020. I thought it was just ludicrous what was going on.
It was insane.
It made no sense to me, other than the fact that all the free money was put in, which that is one of the main reasons and factors that, my opinion only, that the interest rates skyrocketed and whatnot because,
that's why inflation's the way it is.
Absolutely.
That's economics 101. You can't print money and expect
a lot of people don't
inflation.
Get that. I talk about, fiat currency and how it's not backed by gold anymore. And when you print it, it's completely devaluing, and because it's being devalued, it's inflating the products that we buy and assets and whatnot. But I still thought it was just, it was heating up around 2019 from what I noticed. But the fact that we were, allegedly in this global pandemic, and yet the real estate market was going crazy. And I'm just like, I get it. People were getting free money, but that's also the free money that was being given, or the checks that were being distributed because they forced us to shut down, and then they decided they want to print $6 trillion. But it wasn't like they were giving away $50,000 checks to go out. These
so
were
true.
So that
So
was,
true.
I mean, normally a $2,000 check or $1,200 that was coming from people that couldn't go to work and things like that.
I believe other factors were at play.
Would have been spent on frivolous items, TVs, crap like that.
And they were.
And iPhone 15s or whatever number we're up to. But
Yep.
I said, what is getting the driving force to get people to go out? Why right now do you have to have a phone or a house, pardon me, to get into while everybody's supposed to be hunkered down? But I'm open to listen to what you have to say, because I still thought that was a crazy time. And
and I still to this day, we'll get into it in a second, but also as a podcaster like yourself, we are thinkers. We're people that do a lot of free thinking. I know enough about your background that you're a free thinker. That's why I'm enjoying this conversation today. Without getting into the weeds, there's a lot of things I question from the entire 2020 point on. And now, unfortunately, every move that I see, whether it's political, but primarily in business, economic move, I question everything. And I don't like to be that way, because I think you need to have some kind of iconic beliefs or some kind of very sturdy beliefs to build off of. But those are being shaken. We just don't know. I just think there's other forces at play. I think it's very easy now for governments, especially economically, to be manipulated, and that's what scares me. And I think with AI and everything else coming, I just don't know if we're going to we'll have a lot of certainty. I think things change. I think, as we talked earlier, economies are cyclical. I get it, but I don't know if any real predictability is really there anymore. And that's what's unsettling.
It's tough. It is, because again, I've also said, because I mentioned when's the crash coming, but I also told a lot of people I discuss, and this is outside of my business, it's just friends who have economic backgrounds that I can kind of speak more freely with about things, or I should speak more freely with. I remember saying, I also wouldn't be surprised, and I would probably, if I'm going to bet, it's going to be like this, where it's going to be a bounce back and go even up more, because what my personal opinion is as those rates drop, you're going to the price of, and it's also just an expectation with the seller now. So I'm looking at some investment properties that are technically single-family homes that I want to turn into some short-term rentals in some spots. Well, because in these areas and these nice destination areas, and a lot of people were flocking to these mountain regions and more vacation destinations during those times, houses were selling for astronomical amounts, where the year before they weren't. Right. And now these people have that set into their heads. So you're now dealing with that dynamic of them not wanting, well, no, 2 years ago, that house sold for $430,000, so I'm going to sit on it. I made offers on houses, and I said, this is my offer, and I'm sticking to it.
Have to.
6 months later, I see it's still on the market.
Oh, yeah.
So
you'll see that.
There's that, but I also believe that once these interest rates go down, that you're going to even see a higher.
I think that's what we need. We need interest rate. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think the market can adjust. If we would magically get more inventory, I think the market would adjust to the interest rates where they are, or that's the new normal. Okay, but if the interest rates would go down on their own, we would immediately see more inventory, and we also would see. I mean, not just a leveling off of home pricing, but I think you would see a deflated home pricing market too. Hopefully not catastrophic, but I mean something. We need people to list their homes. Yeah. However we get there, I really at this point don't care. Whatever the trigger is there. I think societally, I think we're calm enough now that we're past the pandemic. I don't think there's a lot of that apprehension. It's just that they're sitting on a 2.5% mortgage now, and they need to go out in a tight market and find something else if they sell. So unless it's a specific thing where they're going to a retirement community or it's an age-related issue, if it's just looking for the next move or the downsize move, it's hard. It's hard. The inventory's not there. We need it's lower interest rates to drive. And
the statistics show that over the course of the next 24 to 36 months, that we'll have the most entries into retirement.
No question.
So generally, that's normally when you size down. But again, you're
largest transfer of wealth is coming.
Oh, absolutely. Especially because we look at a lot of like boutique hotels, things like that. We're looking at and that are in just businesses in general, because we're in the M&A space.
Right.
And businesses in general, in various sectors that we work through that we're seeing that like the grandfather or even the father now isn't, and the kids don't want it passed on, but they don't want to just walk away. They want to try to sell because it's still operational.
Sure.
But it's also, with that said, see, then you're looking at where we want to downsize, but we want to enter, or their houses are paid off, but now I got to go into paying 6 or 7%, possibly 8% interest rates, and I'm on a fixed income. And so
it's not possible.
This is going to be a weird way of how this is going. This is where the unpredictability comes in that you mentioned, in my own opinion. But also, then you have younger folks that are going to get into housing that could even go higher than today, even with lower interest rate. So really, like, where is the? I mean, the fact of the difference of like a $250,000 home today than it was 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, is mind-boggling. And I also am like, well, how do these people making it?
It blows my mind.
Yeah,
right?
And that's where I'm wondering, like, how the next 2000, because I understood how 2008 happened.
Right.
And it was a lot of people who were getting mortgages they shouldn't have. I couldn't believe what I would see because
let's just say what it was. It was mortgage. We had mortgage fraud.
Absolutely.
Well, we had appraisal fraud, which precipitated mortgage fraud.
Yes, and I know because I remember meeting people who worked. I applied for a job before I went on my own because I worked in the cellular industry, not pagers, but cellular industry for a while, and then I wanted to do my own thing. But right before, I was right at the tail end. There was this mortgage company in Pittsburgh, and I had actually sold a cell phone to a gal who, she's like, I used to work at Foot Locker, and now I make $240,000 a year. And then I started meeting more people as I got into the industry right before the crash. And you saw that. I couldn't believe when
it's easy when they fake the appraisals.
Yeah, working through, like I worked on a short sale in a house up in Robinson in a newer plan, and the house I guess today would be around like a $400,000 house, but at the time it was like $275,000. This guy worked for the same mortgage company that I applied for, lost his job. They didn't pay their mortgage for 36 months. And they got to live there. And I remember saying, I hope you're keeping all your, whatever you're doing now for a living, I hope you're keeping your money in a safe or something in cash because, that's the way to get around it. But it was just, and just seeing how they were able, and remember like there was like second and third mortgages just to get to that closing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it was crazy. So I don't know. We'll see where this goes with the real estate, but I believe we will. My opinion, we're going to have another run up, but I believe around 2030 it'll probably.
Oh, I think so as well too. I just do believe that we definitely need lower interest rates to spark the surplus of industry of inventory that we really desperately need.
Yeah, I agree, and also it's just just to pay interest is that's. Man, oh man, like that's a hidden tax in itself, and I get it how finance works and whatnot, and if somebody's lending money out, they want to get a return.
Well, the thing is too, which I've heard,
also dictated by a non-federal entity. But,
no question. Well, and it's funny because one thing that I do believe is our industry, our realtor industry. I don't like to use that word realtor anymore. That's a whole nother story. But we are not. There's no mechanisms in place at the state levels for effective training. There's just not. It's not enough training. We've got too many people out there, quote unquote, practicing real estate that are just not trained enough. Sorry, said it. And that precipitated a lot of the nonsense that I witnessed in 2020. I backed off my practice during the pandemic, not because I was afraid to go outside. As a matter of fact, that probably was the opposite. I just didn't like what I was seeing. I did not like this. I was seeing inspections waived. I was seeing new buyers fresh with money being told not to do home inspections. We need to clean up our own act. We can't let that happen again, regardless of the economic surroundings. We need to be better as agents.
So it's still going on. I'm going to tell you a story without giving too much details and incriminate myself. But I told you I was looking at a few properties recently in a mountain region destination area. So there was a property that popped up, and I saw where I could it's one house, but things that they had on the property, I was going to be able to Airbnb multiple structures on there. And I was like, this is an unbelievable opportunity. This is back in January, February. I said, I'm coming up tomorrow. Didn't even get a chance to go up and see it. And they said, it's already done, a deal. And I'm like, well, you didn't get to hear my offer. No, it's already done. 2 months later, so last month, I see the same property come back on the market. I'm like, boy, that's odd. Something happened. And so I called the now realtor, and it was a very similar. They waived inspection. Just hurry up. A bank approved of this deal. Then they go to resell it. Now they can't sell the property because there's severe plumbing and septic issues. And I was just like, and then they can't sell it. They're now trying to sell it for more than it sold for 2 months ago because they have to close out their bank note. And I was like, so the next buyer should take the hit because of your mistake. And so it was, and I said, that bank shouldn't have. So you're starting to see that again, where banks are approving loans, and that's just one instance.
Yeah, well, it's tough for the banks too because they're counting on the appraisers to have a working knowledge of things like that, and that's a different discussion. I mean, can you really bank on an appraiser to give a well verification or a septic verification or a roofing verification? They can look and spot things, but is that really their job? Maybe a small sliver of it. Sure. If they see something visible, but you know as well as I do, they're looking for value based on location, visual condition, and then specs in the property. And if the realtors are not doing their due diligence in conjunction with great home inspectors and being honest with their buyers, and there's an honest give and take between the buyer and the seller, and everybody's working above board, if none of that, if parts of that are missing, you're going to have situations like you just said. It's been, and this isn't rocket science. You know, I mean, it just needs, if everybody would be honest and try to work for the betterment of the deal. I mean, the toughest thing about business for me is that I'm not a competitive person. And when I say that, people will say, how can you not be competitive? At my younger days, Jeremy, I was competitive, but not to the point where I lusted after what people were able to do, or it was really looking inward and deciding, am I where I need to be based upon my commitment to what I'm doing, right? Agents are not my competitor. If you hired an agent, but you were going to interview 10 of us, okay, I guess you could theoretically say the other 9 agents you're going to interview and me, they're my competitors for this deal. I never look at it like that. This is what I do. You're going to dig me or you're not. Great. I want you to get what you want. The point is, when I go into a deal, the agent on the other side of the transaction is my partner there, not in a unseemly way where we're sharing information we shouldn't. No, they need to make it work for their seller to sell that house. I have a buyer. My buyer wants to buy the property. That agent and I need to work in good faith with each other in an honest fashion. That's all. They're my partner in the process. They're not my competitor. And unfortunately, that we operate in a very competitive circumstance as agents, and I've never understood that. I've never understood that.
Because it's, and that's the one industry it's not supposed to really be like that. I just went through another business transaction recently it's put on the sideline now, and I felt, it's funny you bring that up because I felt that way. And I said this to my attorneys at the time just yesterday, and I said, this isn't the way business is supposed to be run. This is supposed to, how do we compromise? And the other side wasn't willing to compromise. And I've dealt with this in so many, I'm in the oil and gas industry as well. And if you want to talk about competition, when the natural gas boom, we're here in South Point, PA, the natural gas boom, selling subsurface mineral acreage, it was cutthroat. Yeah. I mean, it was brutal. And I remember having to sift through, I would say 9.5 out of 10 people were snakes in the industry.
It's a shame.
And it was a shame because in the end, the farmer that, the old folks who aren't making much, and this is like winning the lottery to them, are getting scammed and whatnot and stuff. And I am a very competitive person, but with that, I also seen a lot of, I have a very small circle. Like my main business partner, he's 40 years my elder, is probably the most honest and ethical person, and he's a legend in Washington County in certain sections. And but you'd be shocked how many people. And we do international business, so I get it. It's unfortunate for that because it really is supposed to be, how does this work out in best, especially in real estate, for the seller and the buyer of this piece of property.
It should never be adversarial, and there's too much. It's funny, whether it's wherever I go, invariably there's a coffee table whenever office I walk in, and I see agents, sometimes some very great agents, but I see them on covers of magazines, glamour shots. I see images of cars. I get it, man. If you're successful and you want to live a certain way, I respect it. If your money, do your right. I don't know if it sends the right message to the public. We are not celebrities.
It's not a Wall Street
We're
broker.
not, no, and we're not celebrities. And based upon the very minimal requirements to be a realtor, to be a real estate agent. You haven't earned the right in my societally for me to pretend to be someone that you're not.
Oh, I see.
And that's what. And I'm sorry. I know I'm offending people that are friends of mine, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. And it's not just in there, but I know I've seen a few where like
it's an illusion.
They put their glamour out of like a sports car out in front of their office or their place of home, residence or something, and then they have this big, and it's just like, and they're probably setting this to me when I drive by, it's like that real estate agent drives a Ferrari or whatever it may be, and it's just like, and it's like parked specifically so they know that that's them. And whatever, you're successful.
Well, branding's branding. I get it.
I'm a staunch capitalist. And
100%.
If you work your ass off and you want to you want to waste your money on a Ferrari, go for it. But like, I get where it's not. It really should be more about that industry in itself needs to be, because this is a decision and a commitment. And what I witnessed during the housing crash was too many people were, I need to get the commission here, and they didn't give a shit about the person. And those people were homeless, moving out, and like the conversations because here I'm kind of coming in, and at the end, my end goal was like, yes, I am here to help you. Mm-hmm. And when I first went into that industry and doing the short sales and this and that, we had a program. Yes, in the end, I wanted your home. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to take it because the bank's going to take it anyway.
Certainly.
But as that journey went through and I heard the heartfelt stories, like I used to have people come into my office, family members, and I would have to be a therapist for a half an hour. Certainly. And they were screaming at each other like a father and adult daughter who, I signed that mortgage for you. And I would sit back and let them just have it out for 20 minutes. And then I would have to get into like being a therapist and then having to go at 45-minute mark of explaining like how I can try to save you from going to foreclosure. So maybe in like 12 months from now, you'll be able to go get another mortgage instead of going to a bank foreclosure where you're probably not going to get touched for 3 years and you'll be renting and overpaying. So like it was and that's where like I kind of got out of that industry because I really identified like these people were taking advantage of.
Well, a good agent, like speaking from my side of the fence, in my opinion, a good agent at the core certainly has to be well trained, but it's the intention, it's the honesty and the intention and the willingness to eat a certain amount of your client's stress on a regular basis. You might not have to, but are you willing to do that? That we are compensated well for what we actually do, but part of that is the emotional component of it, and you have to be willing to do that. People don't like me to say that, but we do. Part of our job is we eat stress. We help our client through difficult times sometimes just to be an ear to listen to. There is a psychological aspect to it. To deny that doesn't happen is wrong. I mean, it absolutely does happen. You have to be there. That's why you earn the money you do. If your focus of that deal is just, if you see dollar signs over your customers' heads, and I've said this 1,000 times and I believe it, if you see dollar signs over every customer you have in your planner, in your CRM, if every client has a dollar sign over it, I said, you're doing real estate wrong. Yeah. If you take those dollars and put them behind you and you just basically make people happy, the money will follow behind you. And you won't be able to count the freaking money. Just make enough people happy. I mean, Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, they all said it.
Absolutely.
The money will follow you, but you have to be of value and you have to, just make people happy.
So you brought up
end of story.
Because we're going to jump into another subject matter, but you brought up Jim Rohn, and he's
my hero.
Absolutely, I listen to him almost every single day, and
yes,
and if I had a time machine, it would be long time ago I used to say I'd want to see this famous baseball player or this and that or hockey player or whatever, or this famous person, and some people say I would go back to Woodstock and see Jimi Hendrix and stuff. He was one of my favorite guitar players. But number one on my list, actually, where I am today, would be Jim Rohn.
No, we're
to be able to sit
kindred spirits. Then
to be able to sit with him in a live setting would have been amazing. I mean,
my most cherished possession is the hardbound cover of Living in an Enchanted Life that he has signed to me personally, and I had. It's the hallmark of my library, and it's funny because when you talk about Jim Rohn, a lot of people will poo-poo him because it's also elemental. Well, you're absolutely right, because Roan realized a long time ago when he was giving speeches at the Moose Club, you know, in Snake River, Idaho, Snake Canyon, Idaho, when he was asked to do that, people wouldn't do the fundamentals, even from a thinking standpoint. It is elemental. You know what? But he's successful and revered because society doesn't do the elementals. He's a constant reminder to get your house in order. It doesn't have to be complex, but Roan is just continually, his legacy is that he presented in a grandfatherly way a reminder that you need to have your house in order. And if you don't, if there's things lacking, it's going to affect the rest of the picture.
And he's one of the reasons why, one of the driving points behind starting this podcast, and obviously what I also do, because it's about a legacy, because it's, you know, one of the things, if I can even on a small scale be able to leave something behind that can still be shown 40 years from now or looked upon, you know, that guy's words are going to be living on forever, and that's a legacy, and he's changed lives. I mean, look, Tony Robbins, he was Tony Robbins' mentor. And, you know, and some people are like, oh, it's raw-ish. I'm like, well, not really. It's raw-ish to an extent, but like, if you ever listen, like, you talked about how Jim Rohn or Tony Robbins, like, yeah, there's some raw to it, and they're different types of personalities, but they really get down to the inner details.
Absolutely right.
See, a lot of people go to these like conferences, or they, you know, I used to go to these real estate conferences, and they just wanted to sell you a damn program, and they get everybody excited, and you'd be shocked how many people run up after an hour-long pep talk to write $20,000 checks, and I'm like, and then they don't do anything with it. And I'm not saying that there's programs, like some people did take those and were successful when they were to take the blueprint, but like most of these people go to whatever it is, and they get excited, and that excitement, and that's where like the words of these two gentlemen that we're speaking on, why I respect them so highly, is it goes into. People struggle with the details of how to do it on a day-to-day basis. And I think, like, especially today, we go back to the technology, the focus level isn't there. And so it's why we started this podcast. So, and with that said, with the podcast, so you have, outside of real estate now, our next phase is you have a podcast. It's been on for 5 years, I believe.
Yeah, we're over 5 years now. I can't believe it.
And you mentioned off camera, it was like, it's a hobby still, but you're invested in it. You know, you got an awesome studio, and you put out some pretty good content. And Joe Rogan was your reason why I listened to him. What a great show. There's a lot of good shows now.
Yeah. Most sure.
Look, see, that's like one pioneer that ended up. I mean, I like Valuetainment, Patrick Bet David. I mean, unbelievable show. There's a lot of, you know, Andy Frisella is somebody I listen to. What a guy and whatnot.
Lex Friedman's another great one now.
I mean, it really is. So, but you know, you said the Rogan experience is what kind of propelled you. But did you ever think it was going to still be here for 5 years?
No. Everything builds. You know, it's like one thing after another. We shut Boogie Street down in 2014. One of the last conversations I had in the Boogie Street area with Paul Stanley was he was on his way to be on Joe Rogan's podcast. I had no idea what it was. And I thought I was hip on technology. Because, yeah, it's like this thing. It's not on television, but it's like on YouTube, and you download it, you know, and you can, while you're working out or whatever. But I'm going to do it. I got the book out. I'm going to do it. As soon as I saw that show, I'm like, what is this guy doing? I mean, he is just sitting down and having conversations with no notes, just conversations, and people are flocking to watch it. Now, he's obviously getting top 8 guests. I get it, but I started getting addicted. And so for 2014, 15, 16, 17, I kept watching, absolutely addicted. And then I thought to myself, I can do that. I mean, I love engaging in conversations, real conversations, and pick people's brains, right? No one in Pittsburgh is doing that. I mean, I'm looking around. No one's got their own studio that I can see. I mean, how hard could it be? So there was a little space down the street from me, $100 a month, rented it. I had all these remnants from the Boogie Street area, guitars and pictures of rock folks we worked with. So basically it was just a reflection of me. You know, I'll get real egotistical here, put my name on it. Let's just see what happens. 6 months, if I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I thought we'd last 6 months. And then it just got legs, and then the pandemic happened, and then everybody just they were just thirsting for connectivity. And people want to watch other people having conversations. They don't want to talk to anybody themselves, but they love watching other humans talk. I mean, on the face of it, it's ridiculous. but you can't deny the numbers. So something's going on. We are so into our screens now, but we must be craving more human interaction.
Well, it's also, I believe, a source of information, whatever the topic. Some of this stuff's just silly, and I wouldn't ever waste my time on it. But mainstream television and news networks are just so. I haven't had cable in probably, I think, 2012, and I have no desire to ever get it. To me, it's a waste of time. I'm too busy. I can't sit in front of a television program.
Oh, it sucks your brain out of your head.
And so, for example, why I believe that they're drawn to this and these types of conversations is because, so you turn on the news and let's just get past the first 8 minutes of negativity and how many people were robbed and how many fires and people's homes and were murdered. It's literally verbatim the same exact down the road. Like, you would think at some point one of the news networks, whether that's one of the big ones, a city, medium, would maybe, we're going to start with sports today. I know when they win a championship, they do, but outside of that, it's literally the same thing over and over. When the weather's going to be on, when sports is, it's 8 minutes of hell and negativity, a commercial break. Weather's usually around the 12 to 14 minute mark, another commercial break, and then around 11:20 we got sports, and then we finish off with a good story when everybody's turned off. That's
exactly right.
And so and people get tired of it, and they lie. It's a complete bullshit lie that they're doing.
Really?
Yeah. And so they lie, and it's on all sides. I'm not partial. It really is, and it's just BS, and you can't trust them. All they're doing is reading a script.
Well, they turned our public service, which was our news traditionally, which is a public service. It's for profit, but it's essentially you're providing a good public service. They turned that into entertainment. Yeah. We let them. Yeah. We became those craving the entertainment. We let them tabloid. We turned our news into a tabloid. And I'll tell you, I'm old enough to have an opinion, and I think that, yes, it started with 60 Minutes in the early 70s, but it was still very matter-of-fact and dry. Then ABC had 2020 with Hugh Downs in the late 70s, and it was still dry. It started with two shows in the late 80s, and A Current Affair and Inside Edition. We didn't see it coming, but that's where it started. And everything that precipitated that became
the Jerry Springer
raunchier and raunchier and raunchier and raunchier. Not even morally, just in terms of crime and titillating, and have to always be rubbing up against, society. It always has to be confrontational or controversial, and that started then. And it's just now those shows are, if you look back on those now, they're like timid, tame. There's nothing to those, but that's where it started. I honestly believe that. Our news became entertainment, which is a mistake.
So it's not journalism anymore. And they're not allowed to be investigative reporting is just long gone, and real journalists who are going to challenge the narrative by the powers that be, they just they won't do it. And I get it, like they're scared or they don't want, I'm going to lose my job. Like, this is good, we get paid well, to like just read a script. They don't even write their own, it's some producer and that's being controlled by sponsors. And TV advertising is ridiculously expensive even still. And a few years back I did some, and I was just like, what? How much? You advertise on like even one of the local channels. Oh yeah, it's like $60,000 a month.
No question.
And I don't know today. This was a few years back. It could have changed, but it's just like, yeah, that's crazy. And for what? A 5-second spot for somebody to forget about you when the next negative thing comes on. So, my opinion, this is where the internet and the Rogans have done really well, because it gives everybody else it's starting to get saturated at something, but that'll work itself out too. The saturation, everybody trying to jump on, if there's no value, Jim Rowan, there's no value to it, then it'll work itself out. That's how free market capitalism works. But one of the other topics, and I've got a bunch of lists here. So you do sub-series, right?
I do have some sub-series.
All right, and the one UFOs.
We do a UFO show.
Which is, and there's a lot to get in. It's something that's, I used to have a paranormal investigation group, hobby of mine, which was supposed to be just something small. We started in cemeteries when social media and MySpace started. We were posting things, Instagram, Facebook. Then it blew up. Like, if I would have kept running with it, it could have become a real actual business, because we ended up, I don't know, it's just being in sales and business. I was good at people with networking, and I would just go up to like one spot that was on a list of one of 100 places, and I would ask for the owner and say, I'd like to investigate this. We have cameras, and we had a lot of equipment we spent a lot of money on. Ghost hunting equipment's really expensive. So we would do that, and we ended up doing, Cashtown Inns in Gettysburg and places. And what I liked also is I'm a history buff, so I got to go to the back and see a lot of this. And I got to see areas that you're not allowed to be in. And so we were in St. Augustine, and I think we had about 60 investigations, and that's probably another topic that we could get into. But UFOs always sparked my interest, because what I thought was the, outer space, 10, 20, up until recently, I'm not sure that I actually still have the same beliefs. But I don't know, the universe is vast. Whether it's as vast as they tell us, I'm still unaware. But there are encounters, whether that's real extraterrestrial or some new government airplane. But there's a lot of things, especially recently. So first things first, why that as a sub-series? And then I have some topics I want your opinion on.
Absolutely. So I have always been a physics fan, but not mathematical physics. I was the kid that just couldn't get math, but big picture concepts. Always fascinated by that. And I would watch every PBS special and all that. So I had multiple theoretical physicists on the podcast, and I was amazed that I could really just make some inquiries with Carnegie Mellon and with Duquesne University, and these folks would just gladly come in and talk science for like hours. I mean, I'm thinking to myself, what am I getting myself into here? But they were very good because they were speaking in a way that the average person could understand and explaining big picture theories in regards to, the multiple world theory. And it was fascinating to me. And then I said, well, I'm still kind of like crazy about, UFOs, Bob Lazar, and just all that stuff. And coincidentally, here in this region, we have a chairman of MUFON, which is the mutual, I can't remember the acronym for. That's the the only credential that UFO folks have, James Krug. And I reached out to James, and I said, hey, would you want to do this? And he came on. I had a blast. I said, I want to call two of my friends in that both have an interest. So we called Fred Coelho and Julia Mulligan, and then it just took off. And then I looked at the numbers, and I'm like, people are digging it. And it isn't like we're breaking any ground, but James was so knowledgeable. He's a resident expert, right? He's a regional director with
I wonder if there's a gentleman I'm doing an interview with next month. I have to look through my schedule. I randomly called him a few weeks back. Has to be the same guy.
It might be. Young guy?
This fella's older.
Or John Ventry?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I had John on my show too. Good guy. You can't go wrong with John
either. He travels a lot, and he's a public speaker. Yeah.
John's great. Yeah, you'll love John.
And when you call him, it's like his house phone? Is that the
Yes,
same?
I think that's John.
Okay.
Yeah, that's John. And he's not old. Sorry, John. He was worked at UPS. He's an UPS executive, did very well there.
Okay.
But he's been on multiple shows, like History Channel shows.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's. But James knows John also. As a matter of fact, John might have helped James get into MUFON a decade or so. I don't know the story, guys. But James Krug is our resident expert, and just amazing. Like, his knowledge base is amazing. And he is actually a man of science in that he teaches science. And he is also the director of the, I want to say, Neil Armstrong Planetarium, which is down by his place. So, great guy. Anyways, he was bringing us so much information and bringing slideshows and all this. And again, this is not the Eric McKenna Project podcast is not a professional production that you would see on the History Channel. So, it's kind of hodgepodge, but man, we ended up really getting a dedicated audience for this, and we just kept going. And, me personally, I'm very skeptical. I'm still skeptical of all the Apollo missions.
Oh,
I just don't really, I know what you're going to ask me, but the Apollo thing is I'm just not entirely sure that it actually happened the way we were told. I'm not saying it didn't happen or elements of it didn't happen, but I just think there's a lot of gray areas that we might not have been told the truth with everything.
Well, here are questions out and just in general about that mission going to the moon. Why haven't they been back? Obviously, because in certain areas I work in, I know there's a big, and I can't talk about it on camera, but there's a big emphasis on with now Space Force and collecting data, minerals, things like that in space. Like we will, at some time, probably in our lifetime, see a Star Wars like that. I'm telling you that right now. That's about the extent. So there is a big emphasis on rare. I don't want to call them earth minerals, but rare minerals that could be used from the moon. But my thing is, why hasn't it gone there since? You get the question if you watch the video of the flag waving, and there's stories that was filmed in like a desert in Arizona somewhere. I mean, again, I don't know. I mean, we were growing up to believe, Neil Armstrong. This is amazing. We beat the Russians to Soviets to the moon and whatnot. But there's some science behind it that could not make it possible.
Van Allen belts the radiation.
That's where I'm
belt.
going. Yep.
Yeah, that's a question.
How did they make a phone call in 1969 back that quick? And then the recent trip up there, the grainy video with the technology to where looks like it was done here or in a studio in the 60s.
But how can we? Okay, so
I can't prove any of that. And
here's the thing.
It's always the good
right.
question.
And I think that's the beauty of it is the unknowing. I just feel that in light of all of the baloney that has happened, just take the last 5 years. More and more people are going to question everything now. We are getting to the point where we are going to question our own reality at some point. Like we think, we're sitting here, this is physical reality, this is our reality. But the more VR interplays, the more AI comes, at some point, I believe the average person, maybe not from my age demographic, but the younger demographics, they're going to start questioning their own reality. We're not there yet, but we're getting there.
The Matrix.
Well, and it's all by asking questions.
Sure.
So right now we're asking questions about all the rock solid fundamental truths that we believe in society. We're questioning everything now. Is things the way they're being portrayed? Are things the way they seem? Yeah, we always just, hey, the law is the law, and this is that, and business works this way. There were some fundamental, rock-solid beliefs in there. We're questioning everything now. So how can't we, or why can't we question when there's all these little uncertainties with the moon and what happened? And, of course, we're going to ask if that's how it happened. Did you ever watch the Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin press conference when they got back?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you watch the interplay between them when they asked Collins, could he see the stars? And the look that Neil Armstrong gave him and the nudge with these are undeniable. Of course, that's going to plant a little seed of doubt there. That needs to be worked on.
Most people don't pick up on those things, but they're all over the place.
There's part of the society that wants there's part of society that's still, maybe a great part of society, that still needs to believe that their reality is truthful. For the most part, they need that because that's how they can function every day. If you erode the pillars of certainty that most societies have, you start eroding them, then the public gets so full of angst that they can't function. And I really believe that's kind of where we're headed. Hopefully not in our lifetime, but AI is just the propeller. And I'm worried about that.
Yeah, it is. And a lot of people don't. It gets back to earlier in the show, we talked about comfort levels and stepping out of your comfort zone and stuff. And I think that really resonates on that. But so around that time, so then there was a bunch of events I want to kind of go through. And then we can kind of, in the end, ask if your opinion is if it's real or not.
Sure.
But, so around in the 60s, you obviously Area 51 will start there. I mean, let's just say it's a secret military base. It's pretty.
We can probably agree that's
absolutely
high,
and they're all over the country. And in the United States military, that's just what they do. And so, but the rumors around it has always been there's been U.S. Roswell, New Mexico. I have a dear friend, Nick Aston from the Highland Games. I love you. He lives in Roswell, and I always ask him. Now I've been through that region, but never got to actually go to Roswell. It's on the list. And so I've asked him, how is it? He's like, well, if you live there, you're sick of hearing about UFOs. It's probably like if you grew up in Gettysburg, you're tired of hearing about the Civil War. And so he's like, and I said, well, he's younger than me. And so I was like, he's like, well, from what we understand in the town, it actually did happen, So, that kind of then went to Area 51. And then you had the movie Independence Day where the president got to go in. But, first off, do you feel that the Roswell, New Mexico incident is what it was?
Oh, most definitely.
I
don't think it was a weather balloon.
Yeah.
I don't have any idea that there was bodies taken from there, but I think it's definitely possible. Yeah, I think there was other documented abnormalities and crashes. There's a couple before that too. One even in the late 1800s. I think it happened in North Nevada or maybe Northern California. That started the whole thing. But yeah, I think, and you can go down a rabbit hole. Like, we've had an incredible rush of technology. Technology moved at a pace from the 1600s all the way to, like, what would you say, 1940, 1945. Then all of a sudden, from 45 to where we are today, it's so exponentially fast. It makes you wonder.
It does. And one of the things is there was some quiet time with UFOs, and then it's picked up, and I don't want to jump ahead of myself, but during that time frame of like the 50s and 60s, so locally, Kecksburg, have you ever been there? Because it's on my list.
I'm familiar with it, but I've not been there.
Okay. And so
Fred Kowalo, our guest, Freddie's been there. Yes.
Yep. And I know Fred. But in 1965, it was, and I watched an old documentary probably 20-some years ago about it, and everybody and how they rushed, and then the military was there right away. And so they're kind of like...
Well, what do you believe it was?
From what I've watched in research I've done, I mean, if the military was there that quick in shutting it down, it might have been an experimental military craft. Mm-hmm. But I'm very open to the fact of like extraterrestrial and that but my thing is like how back then would they have had knowledge of that not just being an airplane, and why was the military there so fast?
The very far out story there was that the Germans were working on something called the Glock, which was, I think, a time machine or a transporter or something. And the diagrams that were harvested, whether it was by our military or whatever, once Germany fell, it was a pod very similar to what was reported to have crashed there. And the far out theory is that the Glock spun, and some kind of German officer was in there, and it just landed here.
The wormhole. Yeah.
Yeah, and then that was harvested and taken away. I just don't know. I mean, that's kind of far out. But the whole thing's far out. I mean, if you listen to Neil Tyson deGrasse, who doesn't believe anything outside of anything he can see, feel, and hear, to him it's all far out and non-mathematical. And I get it.
It could be, but there is declassified documents like the Philadelphia Project and
certainly
Nikola Tesla was working on time travel.
Certainly,
and it really just comes down to like the speed and the velocity.
And there is some supporting physics that theoretically, if they could make these other factors work, which we can't yet, would cause these things to happen.
Like in regard to like time travel, you can see where if you've ever been on them, and I had the luxury of being able to sit from a friend of mine who was in the Navy and watch F-15s take off from here to like right out here, and seeing how fast they go and where the speed and then the sounds later is telling you there is a possibility. My thing would be is like, how can a human, if that velocity and that speed has to be even to go into a before or after time frame in time, like a wormhole, how can the physical body take that? I don't know that that's possible, but I mean, who knows what they can construct. But because there was a gentleman, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, Andrew Belsaggio, I believe his name. He went on like Coast to Coast years ago. A lot of people say he's full of crap, but he claims there's a picture in during the Gettysburg Address in November of 1863 or around that time, right after, it was 6 months after the Battle of Gettysburg. And when Lincoln came in, there's a little boy in the picture, and he claims that was him, and he was a part of the Philadelphia Project with his dad. Got sent back to that time frame.
Familiar with it.
Walked down the path, his shoes got blown off. Saw his dad, and they were trained not to. And his dad's like, "I'm not your father," and claim. My thing is how the hell did he get back from there? It's kind of like the scene in Back to the Future where he's in the barn in 1950, and the thing's out of plutonium or whatever.
Okay. So, let me add this, if you don't mind. This is where I'm at. How can one not have an open mind when the accelerated amount of technology, let's just say in the past 50 years, if you can mentally just project that kind of accelerated technology ahead 5,000 years, at an exponential rate, how can you actually say with a straight face that you don't think it's possible that we're going to figure time travel out in that 5,000 year period? And if the assumption is that we will, when I say we, humans will, or whatever we turn into, logic would say that we've been coming back all through history. We've been coming back at all. So, yeah, the logic would say we could have people that are time travelers that are amongst us now. As far out as that sounds, it's entirely possible.
There was a weird incident, if you recall, probably it was like 2018 or 19. It happened on, I think, back-to-back days. Or there was a man that was jogging in the city, naked, Pittsburgh. Do you remember that?
I do not.
You should look this. I'll send you the information. It's something you might want to discuss on your shows because it was very bizarre how he was never really identified. And I actually just looked back on this recently because I was just curious. And I said right away, I thought, because the man was able to run, people caught him on camera, but the way he was, and again, it could have been just a deranged man and they caught him and they just didn't disclose his information. Okay, I'm not, a Bigfoot chaser, nothing against him. I'm not saying he's not real, but I use that.
I can't get my head around Bigfoot either.
It is an analogy, but I mean, I'm not like I'm not gullible. And I thought the story was weird because he was able to jog in bare feet, naked, from downtown and make his way up across the, I believe it was the Fort Pitt Bridge in the and got up on Mount Washington. Wow. And he did it in a very short period of time, and it was funny how then it came back around and they caught a guy in downtown running that looked very similar. Now, could it have been? I mean, I don't know. You could have heard from the first one, and some jerk out there thought he was funny, wanted to go out and run naked through town during lunch hour. But I always thought it was very bizarre how he was able to get from point A to point B in such a quick time frame. The way he was the look like as he was trying to get away from somebody, and he could have passed through. And if they talk about wormholes that you can get clothes blown off and whatnot. So that's a story to look up. But in recent times, speaking of, and this is kind of where I want to get into my last part of this story is UFOs, and this could coincide with time travel. So last year we had all these weather balloons, and they did confirm that an unidentified object was shot down at northern Canada, kind of above Alaska there. You're getting into
that's all they said. And you know what happened.
And boy, that story went away really quick. And it was right around the time of the balloons and all of that. And so there's things that I've read about. I believe it's Operation Bluebeam, and they're prepping us for some that they're gonna put on with AI technology, and they're gonna make people believe that we're being invaded. And so you wonder is it real? Is it them being back to journalism? That would have been all over the news for weeks. People would have been going and questioning and taking that risk to ask a Department of Defense official.
Or back then, would it? Because would the government have even a heavier hand back then? And if the government did have a more heavy hand back then, what did they actually keep from us?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You know what I mean? I would think that there's more people that were willing to say, screw the government, I'm going to keep pursuing this now in today's era. Back then, I don't know. I mean, if the government came down, I would have to believe. I would have to believe if Harry Reasoner back in 1972 had a scoop with CBS News, and he took it to his editor, and the U.S. government came down and said, there is no way you're broadcasting this. We have our reasons you're not doing it. I would have to say that CBS would squash that. My question is, would that still happen today? Or could that happen today with podcasts and everybody walking around with video cameras? And I don't know. I don't know. I see your logic, but at the same time, did the government even have a heavier hand on the media back then?
And they very well, because they were afraid. I remember watching a documentary, Apples to Oranges, but it was about the Vietnam War, and there was a lady that came out years later, and in the 80s, felt comfortable, and she was talking about how her husband, they were doing missions over into Laos and Cambodia, and that's where her husband, she found out he was shot down and died, and she was starting to question it, and she got random phone calls stating that don't talk about this. She didn't for years.
Of course not.
So now and that's where. And you're starting to see, modern day with and I don't know if these are doctored or not. I always kind of look at it as they're probably, but I'm open because I want to see if it is real. A lot of these videos now on airplanes but This year, not so much, but last year I flew a lot for business, and I would try to get, and I'm always, now you see the planes below you and 10,000, you always, but like I never caught anything. But it's
My argument is, can they all be hoaxes?
Yeah, I know. I'm not a believer in coincidences either.
Like,
so there's something else, and it's just.
And that's my overall point. That's why I got a great friend of mine, Jim. If you're listening, he doesn't believe in any of it. If it's not physical, he cannot grasp it. I get it. But my argument is there's such a body of reports of aerial phenomenon, all kinds of supernatural stuff going back forever. Are you telling me that every report of this in history is all BS?
Well,
mathematically not possible.
I mean, a response I do to somebody like that is just like, well, there's life form here, and if you do believe that the universe is so vast, and we're not just the only solar system, that why you can't say that that's not. We can't just be the only ones, and so especially if you believe that the universe goes out that far, and we're just a small little piece in this huge. Absolutely infinite.
Well, if these folks are so logical and they're all fact-based believers, I'm guessing that you really 100% believe in humans created form of expression called mathematics. You believe in that. It's all logic-based, right? If you believe that, run the math on the probability that we are the only quote-unquote intelligent life form. Yeah, just run the probability.
There's no way to prove that, and that's now it's coming down to it's a personal opinion or not. And so, it's definitely interesting. And I thought we would be getting more once they had those incidents last year.
Something's happened. It's gotten real quiet the last couple of months. And I thought with David Gresh, it was going to, after he testified in Congress, that whistleblower, I thought it was on. And then all of a sudden they brought out a guy from the Pentagon. The name escapes me 2 months ago, and he dismissed the whole thing out of hand. It was all garbage, and just try to discredit everybody that's come through the past 5 or 6 years since the New York Times story in 2017. And now it's really quiet right now.
Well, here's 2 other phenomenons, if you want to call them that happened. So we had a solar eclipse just happened on April 8th, and at the same time, it's funny how they do it real quiet. It's on the back page, and it's always last minute, but they launch, I guess, along with SpaceX. I believe they're involved. If they weren't, I have my information wrong. But NASA and they were launching odd rockets during that time frame to do tests.
I thought it was SpaceX.
Okay, it's probably. They work together.
Blue Origin, one of the two.
I don't know if I actually know. I know well the gentleman who was the main project manager on Blue Origin, and I know the gentleman whose kid flew on that mission. Pretty interesting, but it was NASA and I believe SpaceX, because he's just dominating that space. But my thing is, whoever it was, it's they were doing these tests during. I get it, you want to collect data possibly and whatnot, but it also is if it's just for fun, that's a big waste of money. A lot of their money is subsidized, so it comes down to what are you looking for during a solar eclipse? Is a solar eclipse even real and just a natural phenomenon, or is it actually kind of created? And then we had 2 weeks, and we were unable to see it, but it was very bizarre recently that the Northern Lights are seen in Florida.
I thought that was bizarre myself.
And I didn't hear. I've been just really bogged down with work, and I got told the day before, oh my goodness, I'm like, Northern Lights, what's all this? And they lasted for 3 days, and I was actually in a mountainous region, would have seen it, but it was all these storms rolled through, and you didn't see anything, but it was, I thought that was odd too. And it's just funny, shortly after they do these alleged tests, now you're seeing the Northern Lights in Florida and down south.
Wait, just wrap your head around this. Anyone listening, it's just if you haven't thought about it, think about this one fact. During 2020, the government giving you all these instructions and talking about this worldwide pandemic that we hadn't seen in 100 years, right? Something similar. And by the way, there's aliens. And it was look, of course there's aliens. Okay. They told us, basically, and
they did.
There was aliens.
Yes, they did last year.
Well, yes, they did it during 2020.
Yeah.
My point being, if any other time in history,
people would have been going.
Are you kidding me? You would have had religious leaders come out demanding that the government clarify and data and the whole thing, but because of the timing of it was 2020. So I believe that there are disclosures to come at some point, and they, you know, whether is it a slow burn, we're going to figure out over a period of time. And I would rather live with an open mind and having an element of skepticism in my reality than to just believe everything that I'm presented. I mean, that's, to me, I can't live that way. I'd rather live the other way. Even if you call me a kook or you call me someone that's living in, you know, in fiction, okay, I'd rather have that because I need to keep that skepticism that what I'm seeing might not exactly be as presented. And how can I not now if I'm paying attention? Yeah. Right?
I think more are. I really do. More people, not just about this subject matter, but a lot of subject matters in the world. But like this one in particular, I mean, it's funny you bring that up because that goes back to sort of what I was trying to get to with the journalism back in the day, and it would be all over, is when they announced that, and even last year when they publicly kind of stated, yes, this is like nobody gave a shit. It was almost just like, oh yeah, you know, ET's here, and but I was like, man, long time ago, like people would have been like kind of like I mean the normal the people who do have their heads in the stands would be popping out and wondering and asking questions, and it was almost like people were like, oh well, and they were more emotionally tied to, you know, something that's some reality story.
Do you think that the proliferation of social media, primarily all the scrolling, starting probably with Instagram, the number one scrolling app initially, until Facebook kind of caught up their methods. You know, we're so egocentric now. Everything is about us, and if it doesn't affect my little world and what I'm trying to project out there or the attention I'm trying to obtain, you know, it's peripheral. It's in the background, and I think that's part of it. You know, I think there's a demographic or multiple demographics now that really are looking for attention, and they think that they think they must look for attention through social media. It's their new reality because this is only half of their reality. The rest of it's on that screen. That even something as crazy as those are aliens doesn't really move the needle for them, which is mind-numbing to me, but we're watching it happen. We're so egocentric that everything has to be about me. So everything else is still, I hear it, it's weird, yeah, that's kind of funny. Trump said this, Biden said this, yeah, it's funny, but it really isn't affecting like the attention I'm trying to get, you know? Mm-hmm. The endangered species in this world I live in right now, and I honestly believe that the endangered species is the traditional celebrity. They're going away because everybody feels they have the power or the right or the platform to become one. See, we don't value, like kids don't value rock stars anymore. You have some anomalies, Taylor Swift, and I guess, you know, is it Drake or Kanye? Once in a while, one will sprout up, but there's not many of them. Even sports heroes now. You know, the walls have been broken down where they're not quite as special as they were before the technology was here. You know, there's a little mystique then. No mystique anymore. That's I want to be a star. I can go to YouTube and I can do this and I want to be a star. My world revolves around me. I don't really care too much about the peripheral. And unfortunately, I think that's, you know, in a nutshell, I think that's where we are now.
Yeah, I agree. And it's crazy times and in certain ways and also good times.
It's great, you know? Though, right?
I mean, it is because like
life's amazing.
I always say anybody, especially in the last few years, people that get down in their life about what's been going on, and whether that's just the economy is what we talked about in finance or UFO stories or whatever, or pandemics, you know, I just look at it as like we were meant to be here at this time period, and we need to embrace it instead of trying to hide from it or be scared and fearful with it, because I mean our journey has to be fulfilling as much as it can be, and we cannot allow things that are out of our control to dictate that. But
for sure, man.
No, listen, it's been a pleasure today. I would love
a lot of fun.
I would love to get you back on, and because we could talk UFOs all day. Like,
we
can get in if you ever want to talk paranormal on your show.
I like what you're doing here. I like the concept of it. I love I think you know, if I may not be too patronizing, you are excellent as an interviewer. I've done a lot of interviews. I have, you know, I don't know why, but since my podcast started, I've been asked to do a lot of interviews, and it's been a rare circumstance where I've run across someone who really does it well, and you, my friend, are good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
My partner, who isn't here, has a better voice than me, and he does it well, too.
It isn't
man.
about the voice,
Yeah,
man. It's about content and delivery and pace and everything else.
Yeah, it really is. I just kind of have. That's why I said before we started, just have a conversation, and
Yes.
it really is. Like I've had guests come on real quick that we get, you could feel the tension and nervous, and I'm just like, just sit down like we were downstairs at the
100%.
coffee shop. And that's all it is, and this has been good.
And the audience can tell that. Like we were talking before we got on here, we were asking about how I got my audience. I think people can sense that we were coming from a genuine place of just having a conversation. Like we filmed our podcast in a way where like the audience is just kind of eavesdropping in on a conversation between a couple people.
That's all it is.
And I think that's the magic.
Really nice cameras.
That's cameras. Yeah, so you feel good about being there. It's comfortable surrounding. And there's consistency.
Oh, there absolutely is, and so and that's what it's about. But I would love to have you on again, and we could get into UFOs or like I said. If you ever,
we can do some reciprocating. I'd love to have you on as well too.
Talk Bitcoin,
do some
cryptocurrency. It's something I'm semi-expert in, but we can go down the list.
Let's make that happen.
Absolutely,
let's make that happen.
For our guest, the Eric McKenna Project, I'm going to link everything down below.
Fair enough.
Website, YouTube channel, all the any of your Apple podcasts and anything else. I'll put links. You can find them below. Remember to give us a like, share, comment. If you have any UFO stories, please tell us about it. We would love to hear, and you will get responses.
Can I give one last plug?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fair enough. Starting next month, I will be doing the hosting duties on 99.3 The Pickle out of Uniontown in the regional area from 6 to 10. So, hey, if you want some classic hits, come and join me.
Perfect. All right. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, you very much.
All right.
All right.